Hello, welcome to YouTube Live. I'm Kristen Iris, a creativity mentor and speaker, and my camera's just a little bit crooked, but that's okay. So I help to let you know who I am. I help socially conscious creatives of color to uncover and dismantle the old oppressive beliefs and conditionings holding them back. The old ideas about who they are, who they're allowed to be, the things that are deeper down that they don't even necessarily know are going on underneath the surface, and to clear those out so that they can create a paradigm shift in their creative work and in their lives. So what I wanted to talk today about was, and I'm trying to remember where this inspiration came from. It's something I'm sure I've talked about before months ago, but about the idea of what we're allowed to do, like the allowed, and that we may not even know, we may not even realize how we are holding ourselves back based on this sort of in the back of your mind idea of what you're allowed to do. So for example, I have talked to, when I was working with writers a couple of years ago, there was a lot of, well, it's just a hobby. I can't make it my career. Like I can't think of it like a career because it doesn't pay the bills. I can't treat it like a career because it doesn't pay the bills. It's just a hobby. Like I can't take it seriously because like, who am I to blah, 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 or I didn't get this kind of education or whatever other bullshit reason. And it was really holding a lot of people back, this idea of like, I'm not allowed to. And it's something I've seen consistently in business and with creatives, is like the idea of what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. So just pause for a moment and thinking about your creative work or project or endeavor, wherever it is that you like to play. And I'm sure that you can think of at least one thing that you're like, well, I could do, like, I can't do that. One of those like I can't do's, like I can't do that, or I can't do it yet. I can do that later when. For example, and I'll give you one for me while you think about that, so keep thinking about it. Probably don't have to think too hard. Just last weekend, I had the idea to reach out to some other entrepreneurs of color about collaborating with me on my upcoming Unleash Your Creative Flow 5-day experience that I'm running next week, which is totally free. I'll tell you about that later. I'll actually enter it in the comments. But I had a feeling of like, well, I can't reach out to them, or I can't reach out to this person. Like I can reach out to certain people, but I can't reach out to other people. And this idea of like not being allowed, that I'm not allowed to because I'm not well known enough, or I'm not big enough, or whatever bullshit reason. And I was like, this is stupid. I should just do it. Because honestly, the worst thing that they can say is no. Like I'm not going to tank my career. I'm not going to tank my business. It's not going to destroy my world. You know, it's like the worst that somebody's going to say is no. And I did have a couple of people who said no. There was one person, and actually the no's weren't really about me. It was because it was short notice, because I got the idea last minute. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to jump on. I'm going to ask some people. So I had one person who said that it was too short notice for her to commit to that with someone that she didn't already know. And someone else said that when they do promotion for things, there has to be a clear return on investment. I was like, that makes sense. And the 5-day event that I'm running next week is free. So like, there is not like a clear, distinct return on investment. So I totally understood that. And actually, I want to put the link for the 5-day experience, because some things that you might be, it's all about uncovering your deeper, like the deeper blocks, not the bullshit excuses, but the deeper blocks holding you back. And I just spelled my name wrong. The deeper blocks holding you back from really moving forward with your creative work, your creative project, and getting clear on what that is, so you know what needs to be shifted, what needs to be cleared, what needs to be rewritten, and then actually getting into action in 5 days, right? So I had this idea in my head, and it's the same thing that I had maybe a month or so ago when I was reaching out to podcasts. It was like, oh, I can't reach out to that podcast. That podcast is too big. Like, you know, I can't do that. I can do that later. I'll do that later. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it now, because the worst they could say is no. And I can always reach out later and try again. Like, it's not a big deal. But these are, I want to say, even smaller things. Like, these are smaller things. Okay, I'm stretching my comfort zone a little bit, but I'm talking about, there are bigger things. Like, there are people that I've talked to who, like, are not even doing their creative work at all because they feel like they're not allowed to. Where they're like, I can't write about this, or I can't, I was thinking of a specific person when I said that, or I can't take on this project. Like, I can't start my own fashion line because, I'm not allowed to do that. I have to take care of my family, or I have to show up in a certain way. People are expecting me to do X, Y, and Z. And that's really what it comes down to, is our idea of what we're allowed to do can often be based on the old ideas about, like, who we are and who we're allowed to be. So what society has told us, and especially as people of color, we get a lot of negative messages about who we are, a lot of negative messages about who we're allowed to be, or a lot of messages that really are minimizing or diminishing to our full capacity and our full ability to show up in, in the world and in our creativity and to create change. So, for example, even just showing up, like, even just as personality, as just people showing up, it's not even just in our creative work. For example, Black women, there's someone who might feel like, oh, I have to be really gentle because otherwise I'm the angry Black woman, and people will just make that assumption about me and dismiss what I'm saying. I've had that before, where I'm like, I need to watch how I say this because otherwise people will invalidate it by putting that old stereotype on me. Or, on the opposite end, it might be like, well, I have to be aggressive and I have to be abrasive because otherwise people will walk on me. That's another way that the how you're allowed to show up or not allowed to show up can start to shape your actions. Okay, it starts to shape your actions, starts to shape the way you relate to people, the way you communicate with people, the way you engage with them in interpersonal connections. It starts to affect whether, like, how you pursue your creative work and whether you even do in the first place. Like I said, there are tons of people that I've talked to that are like, well, I want to do this, but I feel like I can't because insert whatever old idea here. Okay, so some people aren't even pursuing it, and that might be you. And if that's you, I definitely want you to jump in the 5-day experience. Go sign up for it now, kristeniris.com/5-day, because we'll be helping you to explore where that comes from so that you can break beyond it. Okay, when it comes to, like, the allowed to, and I want to talk a little deeper than just in your creative work or in pursuing your creative work, because when we get to the deeper things, like how you show up in the world, that also impacts how you show up in your creative work, how you show up in your relationships, how you show up in your job, if you have, like, a separate job. So these ideas about who you're allowed to be, they're based in a lot of things. It can be culture, okay? It can be societal messages, like greater societal messages. It could be your family and upbringing. So your parents, if there are things that your parents said, or people around you. Religion can definitely play a part in that. All of these things start to shape our ideas about who we're allowed to be and how we are allowed to present ourselves to the world and how we should present ourselves to the world. And when we don't unravel those old beliefs, we end up living into these old ideas. Okay, so we end up living into these kind of boxed in ideas of how we're allowed to show up and who we're supposed to be. And then that impacts, like, it creates a pattern. It impacts the way we interact, the way we engage, the way we pursue our creative work. You can even actually check on my YouTube channel. I have a video about why my writing used to be white-centric. And one of the reasons is because I didn't even realize this until my like early mid-20s, that all of my fiction writing was white-centric because I didn't feel like I was allowed to put myself on the page. I didn't feel like I was allowed to write Black and brown characters in fantasy and science fiction because that's not what I ever saw. Growing up, reading books in the media, everything was very white-centric and white main characters. And so that impacted my creative work. And when I realized that and I was able to dismantle that, it very, very much so changed not only the characters I was putting on the page, but even some of the things I was willing and able to explore by putting Black and brown characters on the page in main character roles or in any roles. But it changed what I was able to explore, and it really opened up my writing. And so the allowed to, and how you're allowed, when you are sitting in these boxes, you're not showing up fully as you are in any area of your life. Maybe in certain areas you're like, okay, I'm a little bit more me here, but you will find that like it shows up in so many different areas. And it could be that you have different rules on who you're allowed to be for different areas. I have to be this way as a mom. I have to be this way as an employee. I have to be this way as a Black woman or an Indian woman or a Black man or a Latino man or whatever it is. I have to show up this way as a queer person. You may have all these kind of like different little boxes that you're finding yourself living into. And breaking out of that is not about going the opposite of what that idea is. I'm going to say that again. Breaking out of those boxes that you might be living in on who you're allowed to be is not about doing the opposite of what the box says. And this is a trap that a lot of people get into. So I really want to stress this, because I did this too. And I realized that in doing that, I was actually perpetuating the same old stories. And I was perpetuating, and I was still being entrapped by the same old stories, even as I was trying to break them. Because I was trying, like when you are trying to prove that you are not this label, that you're not this idea, that you're not X, Y, and Z that people think of you, when you're trying to prove that you are not something, you're still letting that something control you, because you're acting in relation and in response to this idea. So you're acting in opposition to this idea instead of just showing up as you are, showing who you truly are, letting that be expressed in the world, which is hard to do when you've been living in boxes and you're afraid of, that the world is going to reject you, or you're afraid of not being accepted, or whatever the consequence is. But when you are trying to be the opposite of this box, that box is still entrapping you. And I did that in some respects. In certain ways, it wasn't like a label. It was more of like trying to prove who I was, or to prove how good I was. That by doing that, I was living into the story that people wouldn't see me unless I was really, really good. Like I had to prove it. I had to make sure that they saw me. And that ended up letting this control me to where I was doing things and I was pursuing things that like I really was not 100% gung-ho about. Like I loved them, I was passionate about, but was like, I don't really have to take it to that level. I'm only doing it because I'm trying to prove something. And that's not healthy either. And so when you are trying to live, when you are living in the boxes because it's safe, you're not being authentic. When you are trying to prove the box wrong, you're also not being authentic. When you can start to break down those ideas and see how those patterns have shown up in your life, and then start changing those patterns, the ways that you're living into them, which can be trying to prove it right, trying to prove it wrong, trying to be the opposite of something. When you can start breaking those patterns and learn to really fully accept who you are and express that more and more, then you are starting to break beyond the ideas of what you are allowed to be, who you're allowed to be, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. Okay, so it takes being who you really are, not being the opposite of what people think, or being the opposite of what you think people will think. And when you do that, that also allows you to open yourself up in your creativity to let your creative work be everything that it really can be, for it to take shape in the way that is really authentic to you, because you're not trying to You're not holding yourself back because of what people think. You're not holding yourself back because of what you're not allowed to do. You're letting yourself and your creative work take on a full life of its own, right? So pay attention to, like I said, I asked you earlier, and actually put it in the comments. If you are watching on the replay, put it in the comments and let me know, like, what is something that you feel like you're not allowed to do right now? If you're in business, it could be, I'm not allowed to charge whatever price. I'm not allowed to charge $5,000 or $10,000 for my program. Are you sure? I think you are. You might be. I mean, if it's like a 20-minute video, obviously you're not gonna, I mean, I wouldn't charge $5,000 for that, $10,000. But if you're feeling like, oh, I can't charge this for my program, ask yourself why. And ask yourself how many of those reasons are actually true. So that I actually had, that wasn't allowed to charge premium rates. And I took my rates up. And then by the end of summer, I took my rates up again. So start to look at, like, in your endeavors, like, why you're holding yourself back. Be like, what about this do I feel like I'm not allowed to do? What in this situation do I feel like I'm not allowed to do? And then start looking at that. And we are gonna, like, if this is something that's speaking to you, we are gonna be diving into this next week. This might be an area for you to explore next week in the 5-day experience, Unleash Your Creative Flow. Because like I said, we're gonna be looking at what are the old ideas, what are your beliefs about your creative work or creative endeavor, whether it's something that you're actively in now or something that you want to move into. What are your ideas about it, and how are those holding you back? Where do those ideas come from and how they're holding you back? Those are some of, like, the primo things that we're going to be looking at, that you will be exploring, so that you can get a better understanding of, like, beyond the excuses, what's really in your way. And then you're going to be taking action. So by the end of 5 days, you will be taking action in your creative work. You'll be taking action in a way that is, like, something that you maybe haven't done yet, or that you haven't been pursuing. And you're going to be getting in and stepping into your creativity and really feeling what it's like to give yourself permission to go. Give yourself permission to do it. And then when we can dive even deeper in, we will for sure be diving so much deeper in my upcoming 6-week group program that I am opening doors to next week. So there will be more information on that. When you go in the 5-day experience, you'll definitely get more details. But that is going to be starting on the 19th, and it is going to be 6 weeks of deep exploration, major clearing, and taking big action in your creative endeavor. So if you have a creative project or endeavor that you've been sitting on, haven't started but are going slow, or know you're not working at your full capacity, definitely start in the 5-day experience next week. We start Monday, and you for sure want to keep a lookout for my group program, because that is going to be a powerful experience in breaking through those limitations and unraveling those old patterns from your oppressive conditioning. And that's what this stuff comes from. These ideas about what you're allowed to do, that's all old oppressive. Right? I want to stress that. So definitely sign up for the 5-day experience, kristeniris.com/5day. Go check it out. There are also going to be a lot of bonus resources from some amazing entrepreneurs of color that you will get access to when you join, but you do have to join to get those. And trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, you definitely want to get in while it's free. Okay, this is going to be a free run of this 5-day experience. The replays will not be up forever. I will take them off of YouTube. And it will be packaged and sold. So you want to get in while it's still free and get that experience, and also get that live experience with me, because you'll be able to ask your questions, get direct answers, and there is going to be a live group mentoring call on day 4. So you will get one-on-one mentoring and guidance from me on whatever is coming up for you and how to break through it. It's really, really powerful shit, right? Powerful shit. So you definitely want to get in this round while it's free, because like I said, it will be packaged and it will be sold, and you will not be able to get it for free after that. All right. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on the replay, please share this out. because this is important stuff for creatives, and especially for creatives of color, to understand really the things that are limiting us, the things that are holding us back. And one of those things is that story, all those hundreds of stories that you have about who you're allowed to be and what you're allowed to do. And we can break past the allowed, because it's finger quotes. It's what you're, quote, allowed to do. It's not actually what you're allowed to do. You can go beyond that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and catch you in the next live stream.